Morning guys, it's Rumana here with Bonsai with Rumana. Hope you guys are doing well. Yeah, so today I'm just gonna do something a bit different. Last week I started showing you guys some of the winter pruning that I do in my collection. So I'm gonna continue with that. All I'm gonna do today is I've been saving up these few trees in front of me. So there's 8 of them, and what I'll be doing today is I'll just be showing you guys how I prepare them, because what I'll be doing is I'll just be starting off a forest with them. So I bought these trees about 2-3 years ago, and up until now I didn't really know what I was going to do with them. I just like it's liquid ambers, so for some reason I just like liquid ambers. They have nice big leaves, and you can use those. You can, by trimming them, you can actually make the leaves smaller. So this is just an example, just to show you guys that the leaves are quite big. If I put my hand next to it, you'll see it almost as big as my hands. And the nice thing about these is also they give you nice winter colors. So some of them are like this yellow color, but if you look closely to it, you'll see there's actually bits of red in there as well. So that's why I like liquid ambers. So they have nice colors, and also the other thing is they're pretty easy to repot. They backbud easily, and yeah, I just like growing with them, and I have had success with them in the past, so that's why I just chose these trees. So what I'll be doing now is just selecting the branches that I want to use in the design. So one thing to keep in mind is that when you're working or you're trying to build a forest or a group planting, the best thing you can do is actually put all the trees together like I did now. And I just randomly put them on this table, because I'll be showing you guys how I select the main tree, how I select the smallest tree, and then I'll select the trees that go in between, and then also how I place them in the planting. So that's everything that you do up front. So it's not like the normal trees where every tree has to look great and every tree needs to have all the branches left, right, and the apex perfectly planned. So what you do with our group planting, it's a bit different than with individual trees. So the image that you have with a small individual tree is that tree is the main feature, and all the branches in that tree makes up the setting, where with a group planting you have a main tree, a smaller tree, accent plant, and then you have a tree at the back, and then also that entire canopy of all those trees together makes up that scene for you. So what you'll see now is that these trees all have different trunk widths, so that's a nice thing. This one, for instance, will be the smallest tree. So I just see this, I'm just going to move this one to the side. Okay, so this one would be my smallest tree, but then also what you can see now is that here so this is where the apex is going to be. So it's literally about 15 centimeters from the base of the trunk. So what I did is I have pruned this tree back to here in the past. So I've pruned it all the way to here in the past. So what I'll be doing now is I'll be removing this. This is something that I left during the last month or so in the growing season, just because I wanted the tree to gain strength before working on it again. So you'll see that it has a lot of back buds, smaller back buds at the bottom of the trunk. So what will happen now is, as soon as I remove the longer, stronger shoot, the smaller buds will then be encouraged to grow, and that is actually what I want, because I want the growth closer to the trunk, and this is just sucking up all the power. So for me, it is today I will be preparing the trees and making sure that they are ready when the repotting season starts for liquid amber, so that I can actually repot them and I don't have to do too much work on that. Okay, so what I'll be doing now is I'll just be going through all of these trees individually, just pruning them back, and then also I'll be removing all the dead leaves from the tree, so that you guys can actually see how that is done. So I can just say that my 2 dogs are in the garage with me today, so they're a bit restless because it's raining outside and wet, and also I'm talking English, so my native language is Afrikaans. So for them, every time I speak, they start moving closer. So you'll see the one dog on my left over here. So I do apologize for that, but yeah, they will be walking up and down. Okay, so this is the smallest tree. So what I'll be doing now is just pruning this one back. I'm going to remove this long shoot over here, just to where there's two smaller buds coming out on this one over here. So I'll be trimming this one back to here. Okay, there we go. And then I'll just be removing these one or two of these branches that actually died back, because with these trees, when I leave them to grow out, they have quite big canopies. And I know it looks like short little stubs, but now with these leaves, just look at these leaves. So the size is quite big. So if you imagine that this top part is all these big leaves and it shades out all the smaller branches there, so that's why dieback occurs on these trees. So I'll just be trimming this back. Okay, so that's all that I'm going to be doing with this tree, is just trimming it back to this form over here. So I just want to throw this on the side. Okay, so there's this tree. So this is how this tree is going to look, and I'm just going to trim back all the roots at the bottom that's growing out of the container, because that's not going to help anything much. Let me just cut that off. Remove these. Okay, so there's the smallest tree. So now I just need to select the biggest tree quickly. The choice is between this one and this one over here, and we have another competitor over here. So the nice thing about this is their trunk widths are almost all of them are exactly the same. So when we're building a forest, we want it to look like all the trees have more or less endured the same natural damages, or they've seen the same seasons. So the one thing that I'll be looking at now is, because I've already selected my smallest tree, you can see that there's slight movement in that tree, and from the base to the apex there's some change in the width of the trunk. So for me, this tree is definitely going to be out. I'm not going to be using this, and this is also something that you have to keep in mind when you want to build a forest. Rather have more trees than you thought you're going to use in your planting. The main reason for that is I selected 8 trees, and normally in plantings you work with uneven numbers. So for me, I bought 8 trees because I knew some of them aren't going to meet the criteria. So I'm going to throw 1 or 2 out. So in this case, I'm going to throw out this one, because if you look at this tree, you see the trunk line is very straight. There's not a lot of movement in the trunk. So pairing a tree with a straight trunk with a tree that has the smallest tree having a lot of movement in, there's a big discrepancy between the two. So I'm going to throw this tree out for now. I'm just going to put it to the side. Okay, so now I'm back to these 2 trees. So I have this one over here that has quite interesting movement, and I have this one over here that also has some interesting movements. So now we're going to have to select between these 2 trees. So I'm going to use both of them in a design, but also one thing that you need to keep in mind is you don't want all your trees to be exactly the same width. So from the point that I'm working from now, they're more or less the same width, but we know that I'm going to be removing this part, because from here to here, this tree has basically been growing out in the last month or so. So all the leaves fell off, and the nodes between these are way too long. So where I want this tree to start or stop is over here. So, and this tree is going to stop over here. So if you look, if I put the trees right next to each other, this is going to be the main tree. But if I'm looking at the, if I'm just looking at the trunk lines, it feels to me that this tree should be the main tree and not this one, because it has a bit more growth at the bottom of the tree, which is this side branch over here. So also I'll be wiring the trees when I'm potting them, or when I'm building the forest. That will probably be somewhere in late August, start of September, depending on when these buds open up. So there's 2 times that you can actually repot these trees. So it's just before their buds open up completely. So their buds will start opening up and the leaves will start emerging from the buds. That's the best time to repot them, or the second best time to repot them. But then you can't work so much on the roots, would be in midsummer. But then you're going to have to defoliate the entire tree and then repot it. But for me, that's a bit risky when you're trying to build a forest. So what I'll do is I'll actually repot these as the buds start opening up. But because there's 7 trees, I have to kind of look at the average growth of the trees and make a decision based on that. So that is why I'm doing the winter pruning, like I explained last week, just to get out ahead of that. So for me, as I'm looking at this, I am going to use this as the main tree, and I'm going to use this as one of the secondary trees, because if this one has a lot of lower branches, it looks quite interesting. But now at the top of the tree here, there's a bit of a kink that I'm not sure I'll be able to use, because in forests the trees grow kind of tall, and this little kink over here just doesn't fit in with any of the other trees that I'm looking at in front of me. So I'll probably, let me do it now, so I'll be removing the top part of this tree over here so that this can be my new apex. So I'll cut this one back over here. Okay, going to remove that top part, and then I'm just going to trim this part back to over here, because there's a small bud that can actually be the main. So I'll just remove some of the dead foliage and then move this tree branch back to there. So this will be the, so I just trimmed this tree back. I'm just going to remove all the roots that came through the bottom of this pot, because we're not going to be using those. And also you'll see these trees are still in small containers, so they're all still in nursery pots, and I've just been trimming them back and removing roots, and been working on the canopies. Okay, so I'll move this to the side. Okay, so there we have a bronze tree over there, and we said this is going to be our main tree. So for this one, I'm not going to remove a lot of foliage. I'm just going to remove some of the dead branches, which is there and there. This one also seems dead over here, and I'm going to remove all the leaves from the bottom. And then I just have to look at the apex quickly, remove some of these larger branches over here. There's a long shoot over here, but I'm not going to be able to use, so I'm just going to trim this back. By trimming it back, I'm also encouraging the buds the smaller buds to actually start growing, because if I show you this is the size of that bud. It's about half a centimeter, and then if you look at the smaller buds on this tree, you see they are quite small, and they're about 2 to 3 millimeters in width, so they are quite small. And once you remove the main dominant buds, the smaller buds get encouraged to actually start growing. I'm just going to remove the roots from the bottom of this container as well. I'm going to remove these. It's just they've been standing on the bottom of my enclosure on the ground, so these roots have had time to grow through the bottom of the containers. Okay, so there's those. That's the first 3. Now we have our first 3. Now we start looking at the other trees. These trees are more or less the same size. Okay, this one for me also the same problem that I had with the previous one, is it has a kink in the top excuse me, closer to the apex, which I don't feel is going to fit in this planting. And also if I look at these, they more or less have the same movement in the trunk line. So this one looks like it's definitely going to go into the design. Just remove those, and we already have 3 different heights there. So if I want to use this one, it's going to have to see, but it also doesn't have a lot of growth towards the top. So it looks like this one, I'll just look at this. So the line's very straight. Most of its growth is over here, so it only has 2 branches. This one has a lot more branches going down the bottom. So what I'll do is I'll remove the longest shoots quickly, so that you can just make a decision based on that. Go over to this one, remove this over there, and remove this apex. Okay, so this one looks a bit better. Okay. So yes, so that one's a bit shorter than the others. And then we got this tree over here. And I'm just going to measure it out next to the other one. So if I remove this top here, it's not going to work because then it's the same height as that tree. So I'm either going to have to remove it somewhere over here so that it's more or less the same height as this tree. I'm going to have to, okay, this one is difficult because there's a kink in this trunk over here, so it goes straight up, then it goes to the left, and then goes hard to the right as well, and that's way too much movement. Okay, so I'll move this tree to the side. Okay, so there's another one that I'm going to have to put to the side. Then we're left with these two trees, this one and this one over here. Okay, so let's just work on this one first. I'm just going to remove all the dead leaves from the container. And then once again, I'm just going to remove the roots growing through the base. Okay, so there we go. So that's removed. So now, once again, I'm just going to use this. I'm just going to put the turntable to the side quickly. Okay, so I'm going to use the other 4 trees to determine the height of this tree. So we already know that these long shoots are going to be removed. They're not part of the design. Now I have to select a main branch or a leading branch. So this part of, if you look at the, so I'm going to move this to the side of here. So you guys will probably not be able to see this in front of my jacket. Let me just move out of the way and see if you can see it. Okay, so there, this tree splits in two at the top over here. So what I'll be doing is I'm going to be selecting this side on the right hand side, my right, your left, because this one over here is the same width as the trunk over here. This the same width as this trunk over here, so I'll be removing this part and going with this as the apex, because then the width is lower than the lower down. So let me remove this one over here. There we go. Now I have 2 apexes that's more or less the same height, so I'll also go back and remove it over here because there's a small bud close to that side that I can actually use. Now I'm just going to put it next to the other trees. So there you can see we have 5 different heights. So now we have to make a decision. I'm either going to have to add in 2 more of the other trees, or I'm going to have to work with these 5 trees in my group planting. So I'm just going to put the trees back so that you can actually see the trees that I've put out to the side. So there, those trees are back now. So these 5 we know we're definitely going to use because they have similar features. They all have different heights. The trunks are all different widths. They have same movement in the tree. So these ones are 100%. And these 3 are the outcasts. So now I'm just going to compare them and see. This one's trunk is too straight, so that's the reason that one's not in. This one has a kink in the trunk that none of the other trees have, so that's not going to work. And then this tree over here has 2 long shoots, and if I remove it or make it shorter, it's probably going to be as long as the shortest tree in the group over here. So these trees are definitely out, so I'm just going to put them to the side. Okay, there we go, and there they are. So these are the 5 trees that I'm going to use for the planting. Okay, so now you guys can so the next step, so once you have all your trees, you can now go and experiment and play around with placement of these trees. So I'm just going to put all the other trees to the side and then use, sorry, the microphone is just caught up in the jacket over there. Okay, so here we have this is our main tree. So there's a few ways that you can lay out your planting. You can have a planting where it's a big landscape where everything is far apart, where it feels like you're creating space in your planting, or you can have a closely coupled planting where everything is from a closer perspective. So that's something that you're gonna have to decide up front. Do you want to create this vast open space with your planting? For that, I would suggest you use a slab, because that creates, if you have a nice flat slab, that creates that feeling of a wide open space. What I just feel is these are deciduous trees. So with liquid ambers, I would try and go with something that we say is a bit more of an up close group planting that gives you that forest type of feel, like the trees are compacted in each other. So I'll use something like this is the main tree. Then we can play around with the placement of the other trees. So what I normally do is, when I'm preparing for the potting season, is I just use a piece of white tape and I tape it around just use the tape to tape it around the bag. Sorry, because the soil's falling out. Then I mark the trees, so I'll just write a 1 on this tree, and I just do it on the other side as well, because you all know if by watering, the permanent marker fades out. So that's my 1. I'm just going to put the trees in line so that you can actually see. So these X's are more or less the same, but that will short out now. Okay, probably going to shorten this one a bit more to the stub over there. There we go. Swap these two around. So now I'm going to mark this one as my number 2 tree. Let's put my tape around it. And this will be number 2. That one's marked. The same. This one. Oops. Sorry. Just keep the tape on there. This one is marked as number 3. Number 3. Just add the tape. So I'm just going to add tape to this one so that you can actually see that this is number 3 in number 4 in the planting. So we add in the 4. So I see there's a couple of new guys that joined in. So for the guys joining in now, I'm just busy preparing trees for a group planting that I'm going to do in late August, early September, as the buds of the trees open up. So what I did is I've been marking the trees and then adding them into the right sizes and deciding which trees I'll be using. Okay, so there they are, all marked up. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So as I said, as I explained just now, we're going to have to decide which ones we use. Are we going to have a planting where this is my main tree, then I would have a secondary tree to the left, and or your right, another one at that side, and then you have to gonna decide. I'm going to add this one in at the bottom over here. I'll show you guys now, and then the smallest tree slightly to the left. Open up a bit of space between that 2 trees over there, and you can start moving these around. So that gives you a bit of perspective like that. And I've obviously, what I'll do is now all these trunks are straight. So you have, so what I like to do is have 3 trees to the right and then a bit of trees to the left. Then you have a bit of, now you can start playing with the angles of the trunk. So you obviously your strongest tree, your main tree, is going to go straight up towards the sun. Then this tree will probably be angled. So let me just add this in here. So this tree will probably angle out, and then now you can actually start turning this tree around. And what you can see, what I'm doing here, is if you look carefully, you'll see that there's a branch going in here. I'm just going to turn that so it's actually reaching out towards the sun. There's no branches on this side at the back, so there's a branch at the top over here. This tree is my secondary tree, so I'm going to turn this one like that. I'm going to remove this small branch over here, small branch here. So now you have no branches growing on the inside over here. You have a branch growing out, you have a branch going forward, and you have your apex. The reason for not having any branches going inwards and this angling slightly out like that, the reason for that is, remember, trees always reach for the sun. So if you go out in nature, most of these branches going on the inside towards the bigger tree would have died off. So by angling this like that, you're creating this feeling that the tree is reaching out towards the sun on that side. So now if you look from the top, this tree is over here, this one is slightly to the front, and then you add in the third tree at the back over here. You start turning this tree around, turning it. Okay, it's like that. So I'll just remember that is the space. That is exactly how that's going to be. And then I'm also going to angle this tree slightly facing forward. I'm just going to add the taping at the back, leaning to the back. So that's how these trees will be coupled over here. This one will be angled out to the back. That one will be angled out to the front. This tree will be growing straight up. And all the branches at this side, there's no branches on this side. So all the branches are facing out. So this one will be reaching out to the sun. This one will be reaching out to the sun. Just remove the small stub. So now these trees are all in a triangle. So we're creating a small triangle here. So now you can also, by placing out your trees before you start with the planting of this forest or the grouping, you can determine the size of the container that you're going to need. So what I need is, I want to create some space between this side of the planting and that side over there. So what I'll do is I'll leave a bit of space, and then I'll move this tree over here in here. Probably move it over there. So now I have to think of the trees placement if I look from the top as well. So if I look at the top from here, these trees are all in a straight line over now, and you don't want to create any lines. So in nature, trees grow randomly. So these trees are now in a straight line. We don't want that. And these trees are also in a straight line if you go over like that. So what I'll do is I'll move this one slightly back to over there. Probably there. So now these two trees are in a line, but it's not in line with this one. So that tree and this tree is in line over here. So you kind of have a curve going. That's fine. There's no trees in the same line if you look from the top. If you go over like that, so this tree over here is 100%. The only problem I have now is if you look at all the trunks, these trunks go up like that, this one goes up like this, and then this one goes up and it has a kink this way, which is fine, but I just have to turn it around so that it looks a bit more straight. And this curve at the top is not going to work, so I'm going to have to remove this sharp curve there. I'm probably going to have to shorten this up as well. Is a dead branch? Yeah, that's a dead branch, so I'm going to remove that. So this is the placement of this tree over here. So this is where this tree is going to be. So there's a bit of space in between that, and there's no straight line formed with these three trees. So this is the placement of this tree over here. Now the smallest tree over here I want to bring closer to the design, but I have to make sure once again that it's not in line with any of the other trees. So I'm just going to add this in here. So this is probably going to, yeah, something like that. And then I'll bend this branch down with a piece of wire so that it actually fits into that space over there. So this will be my smallest tree. So I want to bring this in closer, but I also want to create a bit of perspective with this tree. So now if you're looking from the front, which is there, you'll have this big tree. You have as the third smallest tree, and you have the bigger tree to the back. So it kind of creates that feeling that if you are the person standing in the front over here, hopefully you can, sorry, you can't see from here. If you're standing in front of the forest over there and you're looking this way, it will give you this perspective that you're looking up into the forest. So that is why I will be bringing this smaller tree in. I'll just turn it around so that the trunk line isn't. Just going to have to move this slightly forward to there. That's just there, so that's like literally 1 centimeter in front of the main tree. But also it's not in line with this tree over here, so that's over there. Okay, and I'm just going to make sure that I've turned it so that these smaller branches face outwards. Excuse me. So yeah, so we have a branch going out that way. I'm going to just remove this smaller branch over here, like that. So now you have your no branches on this side, all the branches on the smaller tree facing that way, branches on this tree reaching out this way, and I actually don't even have to angle that tree because it's already leaning that way. So also one thing that you can see from this, the layout over here, is the main tree is mostly straight, but then if you look at the planting from that side, all the trees on this side is leaning slightly to the right, and then the trees on this side of this main tree is leaning to the left. So it's kind of, it's like the trees are reaching for the sun, angled away from this tree over here, because obviously, as I mentioned, the sun doesn't get into these sides over here. So this will be how these excuse me, how these trees will be planted. And now you guys can, now the nice thing about writing the numbers on each container is, now you can actually take out a piece of paper or your notepad, and then you can write down the specific placement of each tree. So the number 1 tree, you can make a dot and write the 1 next to that. Then use the number 2 tree, write that placement, write 3, 4, 5. So now you have all your trees placed in all the right places. You've written down where each tree is going to be. So the next step will be, once you're repotting this tree, is looking at the roots. So you want to kind of cut away the roots closer to the other trees and angle them in as close as possible. And from there onwards, you'll be able to do the potting of the planting easier than if you're doing everything at once. So planning ahead saves a lot of time when repotting your trees, because you want to have your trees out of the current container into the new planting as fast as possible, because obviously roots dry out, and also you don't want to cause the tree too much stress. That's why I try and spread out everything that I do. Is I kind of spread out the stress that the tree will face through as long as possible in short intervals. So I'll do the trimming of the branches now, and then trimming of the roots just before the tree is repotted. And also the nice thing about removing the branches way ahead of the repotting, currently you have more roots than you have canopy, so that the tree is trying to balance out. So the canopy will grow faster because it has more roots to actually support that growth. So it will be, so when you're repotting it and you're removing that extra roots, the tree will balance out immediately. So that's another thing to keep in mind. The tree always wants to balance its canopy and its roots. If it has more roots than it has canopy, that's a great thing, because then the ramification will happen faster on the tree. If it has more canopy than roots, the tree will automatically start throwing off branches or leaves just to balance out the mass of the roots to the canopy. So this, I'm done for this week. So that was a short one for this week, but now I'll start putting these trees back out in the enclosure. I'll leave them to grow. I'll seal up the bigger wounds. So there's let me just see, on these trees there's 1, 2, 3 big cuts that I'm actually going to seal off. So the reason for sealing those bigger cuts off is anything bigger than a pencil size you want to seal off, because once the rain gets in there or it gets damp, it will start rotting off. So I'll seal off all the bigger cuts. The smaller cuts on the smaller branches I'm not going to seal off, because obviously that's not too big of a deal. Not enough water will go in there to actually damage it. But on the bigger cuts, I'll seal those off, and that will help the tree recover, and it will help with the callousing over of the bark. And then also what that helps is when the growing season starts, you won't have any of the sap leaking out. Because what happens is, I don't know if you guys actually experienced this, is if you cut back some of these trees in summer, and you come back the next morning, the top of the tree where you remove the branch, you actually have all the sap flowing down on the side, and that's because the sap movement or the sap flow during the time that you cut the tree is very active. Yeah, so that's it for this week. Yeah, so thank you for joining in. If you guys have any questions, you're more than welcome to send them through to me now in the live chat. I'll give you guys a couple of moments, and yeah, if I don't receive any questions now, you guys are more than welcome to go over to my Facebook page, my Instagram page, or even go through to my website, which is www.bonsaiwithromano.com. and if you guys have any questions, you can post it there, and I'll get back to you guys as soon as possible. Thank you for joining me this week, and I hope to see you guys again next week. So cheers, see you guys. Hmm.